everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. Can everybody hear me okay? Are we there? Okay, great. Well, let me start off by saying thank you to Laura and Oxford Exchange for having us. This is a really exciting event for our family, as you can imagine, and we're so happy that you guys are here to enjoy it with us. The writing of this book is something that's really been a long time coming for my dad. My dad has had a very unique life, as you all will hear here in more detail. And so he had always thought about wanting to do a book, and had always talked about wanting to do a book, and something he would do when he started getting towards the end of his career. And we always really never took it very seriously. And then all of a sudden he started writing, and then months passed, and he kept writing and writing and writing, and here we are today. And like I said, he's had a very unique life, as a single child of a wealthy Cuban family, born in the late 1930s, growing up in Havana in the 40s and 50s. And then when many kids were opting to go to college, he was actually even accepted at the University of Chicago. He decided to fight the communists instead when Castro started taking over. Ended up in jail, spent 16 years there. Following that, decided it was best for his family to move to the United States, and so they did. His lifelong dream was always to become an attorney. So he went to college, finished college, went to law school, started practicing law, and now he's been practicing immigration law for 30 years. Now he's got 2 sons, myself and my brother, who are both attorneys as well, 5 grandkids. I mean, it's really been an incredible story. And so we're so glad to be able to share it with you all in some more detail. One other thing that we wanted to note, which we think is particularly special, today is the 25th anniversary of my grandmother passing away, my dad's mother. And Carmen Crews, she was really a saint among us. She actually studied to become a nun for a good while before leaving. And she was really, the matriarch of our family. She was the one who instilled the Catholic faith in all of our family. And my dad would then pass it down to us, who are now we're striving to pass it down to our children. So it was a tremendous influence that she had on all of us. So we think it's particularly great that today is the 25th anniversary of her passing. So with that, like Lauren indicated, I'm gonna spend about 30 minutes doing some Q&A with my dad. And then after that, we'll open up to you all to ask him any questions you like. And then after that, he'll be set up in the back to sign any books if you all would like. All right.
For 2 or 3 months, because I was waiting to start at the University of Chicago my master's degree. I didn't start my master's degree, and so I had to go back to Cuba to find it out. We're going back and we're going to do it with all the students, we're going to move the students around, and we're going to find it out. So I went back to Miami. From Miami, I went to Havana. From Havana, I went to a lot of places in Cuba, around the island, and finally, I said, what was I saying? Finally, I decided I was called by, let's say, it's my superior there in the fight against Castro to go to the Escambray, because they had a rebels there fighting against Castro. So I decided to go. And then I was caught by security police and taken to the security police of Cienfuegos. And there I spent about 15 or 16 days. Out of my cell, 2 guys were taken out and shot. And I was, let's say, just one little, they said it was they had judged them and sentenced to death. The trial lasted around 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and they decided, no, death. So one night, they took about 8 people from the E2, the police, and after that, they sent me to the jail. After that, they sent me to the judge, and we were like 30 something because that was a whole conspiracy. And finally, they decided to sentence us.
So what was Havana like in the 1940s and 50s when you
were Havana was called the Paris of the Americas in a certain way. But of course, Havana was something very different from the rest of Cuba. Havana was a center in which we had TV, we had the car of the year, we had the car of the year, we had the last movies, you know. We were completely involved in the American way of life. That's really what was happening. But the rest of Cuba was not that way. Something I discovered very well when I went to the mountains after Castro won. And that was something completely different. You know, the peasants in Cuba were having a very harsh life and, you know, winning very little money and working a lot. And it was terrible. I saw it in my own experience, I would say. So I would say that Havana was very good for the people living in Havana, but Cuba wasn't so good for all the people living in Cuba. And that's why Castro could make a stand after the revolution, saying what he was going to oppose.
One of the biggest decisions, honestly, you made in your life was deciding when you had been accepted to University of Chicago, you were on the University of Chicago campus, about to start your master's degree, and made the decision that you had to go back and fight the communists. Tell us a little bit about what was your frame of mind? What were you thinking that led you to that decision? Obviously, that was the biggest decision. Probably looking back on it, was probably the biggest decision you made in your entire life.
The thing is this: I had been for 2 or 3 months, as I said before, in Dubuque, living in the Wallace House, the Dubuque Packing Company, that they were owners of that, and my father had business with them, so they accepted me there. And I was, you know, just discerning what I was going to do. I had been in jail already, and I knew exactly what was happening in Cuba, that they were taking over, and actually, my father's business was almost going to be taken over, and it was taken over 2 months after. And I had been already involved in what was happening, and I had gone, as I said, one time to prison, and they had let me out in 1 day. But my friends, all the ones that were the same boat with me at the university, were creating an organization to move the students to fight Castro. And as the students have been always the promoters, let's say, of changing Cuba, like in the 30s, 40s, there have been big fights with students, you know, at the front of the fight. I decided, well, they're organizing an organization called the Directorio, as originally it was called, in 1930s, against my child. So I decided to join the Directorio and go to Cuba. They sent me to Cuba to organize the movement of students all around the country, which I started to do, going to Oriente, to Camagüey, to Las Villas, to different places, you know, organizing the movement. And the movement started to go. But of course, at that time, still Castro had a huge back. There's no doubt in my mind about that because I saw. And that was my experience. But I had decided to fight it, and then they asked me to go to the Edgar Mountains where there were guerrillas against Castro, and also I had the idea that I had to put something to project the radio in the Escambray, so I could take, you know, a little, how do you call it, a little. Huh? Or something. A radio to go up there and could start transmitting what we were doing, because the people in Cuba didn't know really what was happening. And then we thought of that, and that's what the reason why I decided to go. And finally, it was caught by security police and was sent to Valor Pines, as I said before. Then started the ordeal of the prison. And in prison, thanks God, I have a little phrase that I put in my second world that was given by Thomas Merton to Father James Martin. And he said, "In these walls, I found my freedom." He was referring to the monastery. And for me, it was like a monastery because I had the opportunity to study many things that never in my life I would have thought to study. And I was with a group of friends that were really very good friends. We were mostly all Catholics from the same organization, Agrupación Católica. And we studied the encyclicas, we studied the Second Vatican Council, we studied economics because we're studying economics in the university. We had big, movement inside of the prison. And really that gave me the opportunity to read and to learn many things that I had never thought about. So that's why I say, it was like my freedom was found in the walls. But afterwards, there was also the forced labor that we fought because we thought that the forced labor was inhuman, etc. And there were killings, there were beatings, there were hunger strikes. Many things happened during those years. And later, we also had the problem of what I mentioned, the change of clothes. The clothes were, we had khaki pants and khaki stuff. And then suddenly they started saying, no, we're going to put you blue suits. And the blue suits were the ones for the common prisoners. So we decided to, can you hear me? Decided we're going to fight it out. So what was the way of fighting it out? Well, then we took my clothes and we were going to be in the other ones. So I was in my other ones for a year, until suddenly there was a change in the Ministry of Interior. There was a security police, etc. And then the guy came in, the new minister, Sergio Albay, came to La Cabaña and he said, no, we're going to change our policy, if you want to use the old suit, you can put it on and not new. At that moment, there was a big change. All my friends decided to just take it, put the old suits again. And suddenly there was a change in policy. And that change in policy implied that we were given the possibility of having movies and playing baseball outside, etc. Better treatment. And I can tell you something as a fact story. Let It Be on the Beatles. Let It Be. Let It Be. I never heard it until 1968. And the Beatles, I didn't know what they were. So I think about 1968, in which we had been out of the world completely. Until that moment, they started, giving us music and movies, etc. And finally, we decided that they were giving us a new plan that we could work for our freedom. And I took it and I started working. And we were working in the construction business for about 4 or 5 years. And that's where I met my sweetheart here, right here. And decided the craziest thing of getting married and having our first son was Ignacio. And later, when I was out of prison already, but Cuba wasn't for me. The structure was completely against somebody like me. So at the end, I decided, well, we have to get out of here. I'd say, was received a whole family up there in Miami and the whole thing. And then, I started fighting it out. And I thought that I had to be prepared to do something that was helpful. And I really, when I studied economics in Cuba, I really wasn't decided about this. And I didn't really think that at that time law school was good for me in Cuba, because law school in Cuba was completely different. But now I had my old dream of being an attorney. So I decided to go to law school. And I wanted to do something special, which is what I've been doing for 30 years, which is immigration, helping the immigrants to get a better life in this country, and trying to get them in. You see the amount of immigrants are at the border right now. So, it's a big problem. And we have a big journey big responsibility in trying to get them in as possible. Possibilities.
Yeah, we went as a family not too long ago, 2 years ago, all together to visit Cuba. We all, we try to go at least every few years, whatnot, to visit. What was it like, going back to Cuba just a few years ago, which had been, the first time you had been back since you left?
Well, the first time I went was in 2014, and that was immediately after Pope Francis was elected. And there was a possibility, and there was new attitude in regards to Cuba at that time. And also myself, Marilena has family, I was in Cuba. So I said, well, I'm not gonna be having a grudge all my life against these people. I have to forgive them for all the things they did. So I decided to forgive, forget, and get going and go to Cuba. And I met there a lot of friends that still were there, a lot of priests. It's a very interesting thing that has happened in Cuba. Since John Paul II went there in 1998, and by the way, Marilena went there with John Paul. There's been a big growth in the Catholic Church in Cuba. And you can see it, for example, in the events that took place in July of last year, in which there were a lot of priests involved, a lot of young people that were taken to jail, etc. There's a big growth that has taken place. So I went for the first time in 2014. Ignacio went with me, and afterwards, David went with me. Then after Ignacio, and I could show him, my life and what has happened. And this is a country that I love, and I love the Cuban people. They're very creative, they're very charismatic, they're very hopeful. And I think in Cuba still there's going to be changes, but they're going to come from within. It won't be from without, it will be from within, my opinion, personally. It's going to be changes because the young people don't know anything about the Sierra Maestra. What they know is about what they're living and the way they're living. And that's why I think there's going to be a big change.
The question is, now that he's gone back to Cuba in 2014, how does he find the conditions of everybody in Havana and outside compared to what it was when he was living there?
Well, what I can tell you is now it's much more. And when even I left in 1979, in 79 I left Cuba to go to the United States. And after that, 35 years passed. And when I went back, I couldn't believe it how it was, so bad at that time. And the thing was, that still was the ideological, pushing and all that. But Castro died, things started getting worse. I mean, they were worse already, but got even worse because of now even well, of course, all the embargoes issues and all that. But besides that, it was really the kind of mentality that existed to over here that people very afraid of the government, what they were doing against them, as you said, when people were in bad shape, but they could move. Now it's completely different. This is a totalitarian system. It's a communist system. Only the party has control of the whole situation. So it's a terrible situation. But what's happening, in my opinion, now, and I've seen it in events, for example, in July last year, the young people don't know anything about this heroism or the Sierra Maestra and all that. That's over. What they care about is what are we going to eat today? What are we going to eat tomorrow? What's happening now? How can I travel? How can I study? And that's the young people that are in the streets fighting it out.
They were, just so you all who didn't hear, they were, the lady here was just asking if my dad knew a photographer that recently had done a series on Cuba that was widely seen here in the United States. What was it like in Cuban prisons?
Well, first, let me say something in regards to the first part. there were two attitudes in prison. Or you were playing dominoes, and picking with your friends every day and doing nothing, or you were studying. I was in a group that was studying all the time. They call us the students. And really, I'm very happy that I was part of that group, because if not, it would have been terrible. I've seen a lot of people that came out of prison completely destroyed. And I think one of the reasons was because we had constant problems with the guards. They wouldn't let us, a happy life, leaving us just to do whatever. It was, lack of food, lack of water, and suddenly there was, requisas, what they called, and you had to go out in the middle of the night, and then they would throw things away that you had, little things that you had. I remember one time we had a requisa, we had like the whole day there, standing in the bottom of the circuit. The whole days while they were destroying our cells, throwing the things around, etc. So they would never let us, let's say, without pressure, constantly pressuring us. That was at the beginning, let's say the first 2 or 3 years. But then came the moment of the forced labor. And then the forced labor, we had organizations that I participated in, and we took a stand against them, against the forced labor. And that was very costly, because there was a lot of beatings, a lot of people killed, because of not resisting the work. I was sent to the calabozo, or what do you call the calabozo? Solitary confinement for 2 months once. And I was with one of my friends, it wasn't my friend so much at that time, and they sent us together. They thought that we were going to kill each other. But really, we became friends. We became friends because, what are you going to do? And there was one famous guy that I will never forget. At the moment that we were going in the calabozo, they were beating us, hitting us, with big machetes. And Juan Ferrer was one of my best friends. And Juan Ferrer was there too. And he started yelling, criminals, criminals, criminals. And then they opened his cell, and they took everything he had there and closed it again. But even that way, at the end that night, it was pretty cold. It was the 25th of December or 24th. I don't know how he found a way to send us a little shirt, that we could put at night. Yeah, one shirt to put. So, he died already recently, about 2 or 3 years ago. Juan Ferrer was a black guy. And as I say in the book, when the first black guy, they said, oh, black guys, our revolution has, redeemed you. The guy that arrived with me to Isle of Pines, they told him, you were a monkey, and we brought you down from the tree, and now you are conspiring against the revolution. And they got him, started hitting him, and took him to the gallows.
The question one of our friends asked is, now that you've created this book, who is it for? Who is it? Who would you like to see it go to? Is it politicians? Is it students? Is it others? What was the reason for creating the book?
Well, and thank God, COVID helped me a lot because last year, really, I had little work. So I had the possibility of saying, well, I want to write down. This is the moment to write. Because, for example, the wife of David, the wife of Ignacio, and people, my grandchildren, wanted to know the story, what happened. So I decided to put it down, not only for them, but for anybody that wants to read it, things that happened and how it happened. A lot of people say, Castro came to power and he was a communist, and then communism took over. It wasn't that way at all. It wasn't that way at all. It took time. And Castro in the mountains was saying, no, I'm not a communist. You can see the interviews. No, I'm not a communist. No, I'm fighting for freedom, for democracy and all that. He said he was a liar, a big liar. And then basically for reasons that I know very well, but I cannot explain easily, I would say the biggest issue of Castro was the hate against the United States. That was for him the biggest issue, the hate against the United States. And it was because also his father was a Spaniard, and his father fought against Cuba in the Cuban-American War, Spanish army, and was defeated, and then he grabbed, I don't know how much land in Oriente. He had thousands of pieces of land in Oriente. And he had that mentality inherited from his father against the Americans, because they hated the Americans. The Spaniards hated the Americans. So I would say right now we're in a different place. It's been 60 years. There's a new generation of Cubans, young Cubans. Castro and his brother are passed away. His brother is not passed away, but very close. So now the new generation doesn't look at what happened before. They don't even know what happened before. But what they know is that they're living in a very bad condition. And most of the young people want to leave. You ask them, no, what do you want? No, I want to get out of here. I have a lot of friends that are around that just recently came around. So what can I say? Well, just what reality is. And of course, things have to happen. Whatever is going to happen will happen.
Organized crime in the United States and a joint influence on creating Las Vegas. But they also had a big influence on Cuba.
Well, when Batista,
The question was, organized crime had a very large influence in the 50s and 60s in creating Las Vegas, but they also had a big influence in Havana. So can you talk a little bit about that?
when Batista left at that moment in 1959, 58, 59, first day. Well, Batista is the dictator that existed in Cuba before Castro, and was defeated by Castro. We joined, young people joined, this is the moment, liberation after 25 years of Batista. Now we're out of it. And suddenly came one that was worse than Batista. But the point is, there was a huge influence of the mafia in Cuba in the last years of Batista. There were centers and hotels, Capri, Nacional, etc., that were controlled by the mafia, by Lansky, etc. They had a big meeting in '56, the way they were going to influence the situation in Cuba, and Batista was their pal. It was friend of it. So everything started to become rotten. In that regards. And when the mafia comes in, they start destroying the whole situation. So that's what I can tell you. The mafia was in Cuba very strong before Batista left.
He was pretty much a puppet.
He was pretty much a puppet of I don't know how to describe it. Of a lot of interests that were involved in his presence there, and he was a thief. After that he went to Spain and he bought an island, and they say that they estimate like that he robbed like 450, 100 million. That was Batista. But Batista was a petty thief. That's what he was. And before he left, what happened was that he sent one of his cronies to see what was happening because he never went to the Sierra Maestra to fight Castro. He never went. Probably if he would have gone, he would have eradicated the guerrillas. The guerrillas were a bunch of people in the middle of the mountains. I've been there, and really there was no place to hide. So, he didn't go there. So suddenly he sends his cronies, oh, this is terrible, the situation is terrible. So he decided to meet, have all his friends in a meeting in Colombia, biggest base in Havana, in Cuba. And then he met, they met at 12 o'clock at night, 31st of December. And then he said, okay, boys, the planes are there, we're leaving. That's the way he went, left. I saw thousands of soldiers in prison that were left behind because of Batista leaving, after all the things here. Yes.
I have a question. I think it's relevant. I think it's interesting. When you were incarcerated, you were taking a heavy radio to the mountains.
Yeah, right. We always say the storm radio. There's one transmitted from the outside in the Keys. But really, I heard storm radio. I was very upset with storm radio because I thought it was not really very good. And then I had the idea that, like Castro had done, he had a radio in the mountains, and he was transmitting from the mountain. And that's what I wanted to do, transmit from the mountain what we were doing.
I think it's interesting that that's why you were incarcerated, and now you should just go to Cuba. So, in the United States, mostly when by transmitting information. And
Well, I think
The question, Penny, is what is the best way to get information to people in Cuba in present day?
well, I'm sorry to say it, but I'm against the law. Okay, maybe some people are in favor. I'm against. I think communication between the people of Cuba and the exterior are crucial for the future of Cuba. I think communication is basic. And that's something that I learned in prison. Because in prison, we had the Voice of America, but then we had the magazine from the Soviet Union, the magazine from China, and we were reading the whole thing just to get in touch with the reality of the world. And I think the people in Cuba lack, because of what I've been there, they lack information. They lack, they only have the capacity to see what the official TV is saying. And of course, now it's different because now we have the internet and the whole thing. But anyway, I think any way to give information is good. And that's crucial. Yeah, no doubt about it. I think all information is good. What I meant with embargo is that I know for a fact that the embargo has been a crucial instrument for the government in the sense, right, in the sense that we are, being attacked, imperialism is, doing the whole thing. The other day when the rally started, immediately he said, no, this is organized by you guys. Nobody was organized by him. And it was happening because the people are tired. People want freedom. People want to eat better, and to have their kids go to school, whatever. And my biggest issue up to the moment, now it's different, was going to Cuba and being able to speak with the people and find out really what their mentality was. And since we have family and friends and all that, that was really my main concern, to have the possibility of being there and knowing what was happening, speaking with a lot of people from the church that give me solid information about really how they think this should be handled. And that's my take. I mean, I really don't have time for
I would understand that, but my father was a history buff, and like history people that. Just that.
Well, by the way, I mean, I'm gonna make a propaganda for a book that I just bought and I started reading. It's called Cuba, an American History. And I found it fascinating. It's really related with Cuba and the United States, all the relations that have been, and it's by Ada Ferrer. It's a new book, but the thing is that the mentality is completely different because that's the name of the book, Cuba, an American History. But in November 24, 1960, we went to the Escap Ride, and I was released in the day of the Virgin of Charity, by the way, the 8th of September, 1956. 1976.
Yeah, he would, towards the end of his prison sentence, they had work release programs. So they would come out and, work throughout the area near the prisons and then go back and work. And in one of those work releases, he met my mom. In another one of those work releases, I was born. So he actually telling the story of what happened in between there. When you got to come see me be born. Like they brought you to see me and then took you right back to jail.
Actually, I had a marriage we were married November 30, 1962, 1972. And Ignacio was born in 75 in October 3, 1975.